We're live. Welcome to Beyond Cannabis, an anti-inflammatory lifestyle to keep your body in balance. So, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Cristina Montoya, and you may know me as the arthritis dietitian. And today I have a special guest, Arash Taghvai. He is from the Apollo Cannabis Clinic. So, hello, Arash. How are you today?
Hi, Christina. I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So now I will share my screen. Let's go. Make this really nice. So let's share it. So you're probably not gonna see me. Oh, you still can see me.
Mhm.
So here we go. All right, let's get this show started. So Arash, you're gonna know a little bit about my personality. So
Sounds good. Sounds good.
sounds to keep this kind of a little bit exciting. So my
Sure.
name is Cristina Montoya. I'm a registered dietitian with the College of Dietitians of Ontario and also a member of Dietitians of Canada. And I'm a dietitian from Colombia originally. That's where I was trained in Columbia University of Antioquia. Why the arthritis dietitian? Because I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for almost 18 years and Sjogren's syndrome for 30 years. And so autoimmune diseases have been part of all my life pretty much. So I promote an anti-inflammatory lifestyle for people with Sjogren's, fibromyalgia, and inflammatory arthritis, as well as any other autoimmune or related autoimmune conditions. So I'm actually a medical cannabis patient and medical cannabis user because I find it very useful as my toolkit to manage chronic pain and fatigue. So that's a little bit about me. So about Arash. So he is the Apollo Cannabis Clinic's manager of clinical affairs. He's an international medical graduate, and he has a broad understanding of medical cannabis and the endocannabinoid system, which allows him to explain the pathophysiology of many conditions and how cannabis can potentially help these conditions. Apollo Cannabis Clinics, they support the patients who are looking to improve their quality of life with medical cannabis across Canada. And just to explain, I have no affiliations with Apollo Cannabis Clinics, but I'm really happy that you're joining me today. So, as a disclaimer, everything presented in this webinar is for information purposes only, and it should not substitute the advice from your physicians or healthcare providers. Just to mention that I have no financial or intellectual affiliations with any organization, but I am very proud to be an honorary board member of a new nonprofit organization called Education, whose mission is to provide the highest standard of responsible cannabis education across Canada. And so we'll hear more about it. But today is all about these important talking points. So basically, we have about 25 minutes to give an introduction on the following talking points. So we'll discuss about the inflammation through the lenses of inflammatory arthritis, role of the endocannabinoid system in gut health, and the key nutrients that support that gut health, some lifestyle changes that can keep your body in balance. And then Arash will talk about the cannabis anti-inflammatory properties. And he will also talk a little bit about what Apollo Cannabis Clinic offer. So let's begin. Hoi. So, oh la la. So let's see, inflammation. So everybody's talking about inflammation these days, right? So even when in the COVID-19 era, everybody has probably heard about the cytokine storm and all the inflammation that really follows when you're infected or when you contract this virus. But let's say that inflammation is actually a healthy, normal response. When the body experiences injury or attack by any foreign object, right? So the body has these really efficient soldiers to attack those foreign objects, right? And that triggers inflammation to help your body get rid of those intruders, right? So that's the body's normal inflammatory response. It helps you to identify the enemy and then attack it and later heal your body. But in certain people, that is not the case. That inflammation, those soldiers continue to stay there and attack him, but they not only attack the healthy tissues, they start attacking the healthy tissues as well. And so that's where we call what the autoimmune conditions come. But there are other things or other factors that can cause chronic inflammation. So exposure to irritants, so environment. My husband is a contractor, so he's constantly exposed to dust, chemicals that can trigger some sort of inflammation. Lack of physical activity, obesity, poor quality diet, as I mentioned, autoimmune diseases, cancer, and also metabolic and cardiovascular diseases. What's important to highlight is that really lifestyle choices have an impact on this on inflammation. And when I came to Canada, I don't know, many years ago now, so I really felt a difference between my Colombian lifestyle and the Canadian or North American lifestyle. So I noticed a lot of increased omega-6 fatty acids, so a lot of junk food, fast foods type of thing, a lot of animal protein, refined sugars, extra like salt, processed foods, and especially less fiber, so less intake of vegetables, fruits, and antioxidants. And what happens to this? So with this standard American diet, which is really sad because it's a very sad diet. So it increases weight, increases central obesity, that particular obesity, the fat cells that are kind of accumulated around your waist line are very active and pro-inflammatory. Then also that leads to fatigue. And again, it decreases the variety of your gut microbiota. And so what happens? It releases even more inflammatory substances that can lead to more pain, fatigue, and poor response to specifically to people with autoimmune conditions. So there's a poor response to those therapies. So here is really briefly what the chronic inflammation through the lenses of inflammatory arthritis. So as I mentioned, like rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, is the most common type of inflammatory arthritis. It affects 1 in 100 people. And so what really happens here, so you can see the osteoarthritis is the kind of the wear and tear. So the inflammation is localized. So there's still some form of inflammation at the joint level. But then when it happens with the inflammatory arthritis, it's just, it triggers a change of reaction. It doesn't only attacks your joints, but it also can attack any organs, right? So it can attack your kidney, your eyes, your heart, like your lungs. It could be anywhere. And again, so that inflammation can lead to like pain, fatigue, and so many other complications. So when you look at inflammatory arthritis, it's like a typical example of chronic inflammation. Is those soldiers, they just never left. They came and they continued to attack. So in order to really address that inflammation, then it's important to consider the therapies, but also lifestyle changes are showing to prove a very important tool to manage that chronic pain and fatigue. So now, what is the endocannabinoid system? Isn't that amazing that I can even say that, Arash? Come on.
Yeah, it's great.
So the endocannabinoid system is a fairly new system, was discovered I think in the early 90s. And it should be really just along the other systems, but it's responsible for maintaining balance within the body. And this system is as unique to each individual as their personalities are. So each person has a different response. But this endocannabinoid system really has an effect on various systems. I think in most systems. So it affects the pain response, your mood, memory, inflammation, sleep, stress response, appetite, digestion, and so many others. I would say it's like a master regulator. And it has an input into every single system in the body, right? And most importantly, the nervous system, the gut, immune system, that it really kind of affects us. So I think there are very like three basic components of the endocannabinoid system, because it works like a key lock model. So the locks are like the cannabinoid receptors. So we call the CB1 and the CB2. Then we have the endocannabinoids. So they're naturally produced by our bodies. So yeah, we produce cannabinoids. Isn't that amazing? So it's not really the cannabis. It was just kind of a coincidence. That's how they really discovered the system, right? And so
That's
they
true.
call anandamide and the 2-AG. And also have the enzymes that create those endocannabinoids and when needed, and they also destroy those endocannabinoids when they're used. And that's very basic, really. So they are basically spread out everywhere throughout the body, but it's been shown that the CB1 receptors are primarily found in the brain and the central nervous system, and the CB2 receptor are especially found in the cells associated with the immune system. And so it seems that when these specific receptors are activated, can reduce inflammation. But from what I see, there's a lot more information about activation of the CB1 receptors. I think we still need to know more about how those CB2 receptors are activated. Maybe Arash can explain a little bit more about that. But again, both receptors can be found throughout the entire body. So I really like to mention this because we are so used to say endorphins, right? Oh, we need to produce the endorphins. Then let's go exercise. And so just as we are able to synthesize in our bodies substances that mimic the effects of morphine, and then we call endorphins, we can also synthesize the substances that mimic the effect of cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, and we call them endocannabinoids. So it's not really the cannabis plant that has many effects. It's like how your own endocannabinoid system responds to the cannabis plant. So just briefly, I will say again, we mentioned those endocannabinoids. So we have that anandamide, which is such a beautiful name, is the bliss molecule. And it really plays a role in regulating mood and emotions. And also in animal studies, they have shown that even prescription medications that treat pain and depression, it actually increases the levels of anandamide. So if right now you're smiling and you're enjoying this presentation, you're probably releasing some anandamide, right?
True.
Then we have the 2-AG. I'll say it's not so sexy and it has a really long name. and, and the main function is to reduce inflammation and help regulate other functions in the immune system. And it helps with memory, reproductive health, and sleep cycle regulation. And then we have the phytocannabinoids. So those are the type of cannabinoids that we find in the cannabis plant. The most studied ones are CBD and THC. That seems to be like a strength, like known for everyone. But there are I think over 70 or almost 100 other phytocannabinoids that we're still trying to understand how it interacts with our endocannabinoid system. So that's why when we're consuming when we kind of consume the whole plant, that's how we get the benefits from consuming the whole plant, just except not just the isolated components. So here is that endocannabinoid system and gut health. So now as we learn more about the microbiome and all those trillions of bacteria and bugs that we have inside us. I want to think about it, but they have a very important role in modulating so many functions in the body, especially the immune system. And so in the gastro or the digestive system, basically 70% of the immune cells are found in the intestine. So you see how important it is to keep our gut healthy, because when we modulate that inflammation through the gut, then we're going to kind of help to modulate the response to inflammation. And why do we call it a second brain? Because we actually found that they have a special enteric nervous system, and it has that connection with our brain, and they modulate our mood. So it's like a really nice cycle that we're communicating between our first brain and our second brain. And I think what is really amazing is that those anandamide and 2-AG are found in the digestive system and throughout the gastrointestinal system. CB1 receptor are actually found in the stomach and colon, and also found on the nerve cells that control activities in the GI system. So this endocannabinoid system is really so important for gut health. And we're still kind of learning about it and how it interacts. And as we talked before, is that the CB2 receptors, oh my goodness, what is this happening here? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna close this. Oh, there you go. Sorry about that. So those CB2 receptors that we're still trying to understand how they work, they're mostly found on the immune cells. And now, so if the gastrointestinal system holds like a 70% of the immune system, so it will be very interesting to see what else can we do with those receptors. So some of the endocannabinoid system that control some gut functions, and these are again from animal models. Mm, because of prohibition, we were not really allowed to do a lot of research, right? So animal models are really important to illustrate how the endocannabinoid system works and how the cannabinoid receptors interact with different cannabinoids. So what they have found is that they actually play a big role in protection. So the activation of those CB1 receptors in the stomach can reduce gastric secretion and it slow down the gastric emptying. So why is that important? Because really that can lead to the reduction of taking those reduce acid reducing medications, right? Like when you think about Pantolo, that kind of medications, that in terms it actually really affects the response to inflammation, because the gut barrier is so important. It also, those medications affect the absorption of important nutrients such as like the B12, and also the calcium, magnesium. So if we can try to really activate those CB1 receptors and not use those medications, that would be awesome. Also, the CB1 receptors are known to be the physiological brakes of the gastrointestinal system. So for those who have the runs because of irritable bowel syndrome, so activating these receptors can actually help to slow things down. And it seems that also like components or phytocannabinoids like CBD can reduce that intestinal hypermotility. And I think what is really fascinating is that interaction with the microbiome. So it's proposed to, the endocannabinoid system is proposed to interact with that gut microbiome and regulate that energy balance, inflammation, and also maintain the integrity of that gut barrier. That is so important, so those toxins really don't go into the bloodstream and trigger more inflammation. Of course, more research is needed. I think one important research about this that it really fascinated me was when I was reading about the munchies. Right, Arash? Have you heard about the
Hmm.
munchies?
Definitely have, yes.
So it's very interesting because then they will say, that, okay, so it has like this function, that the activation of the CB1 receptors, right? That it could enhance the production of the ghrelin hormone or the hunger hormone, or it can also enhance the sense of smell, right? So foods just taste more delicious. That's why you kind of go for like those savory snacks mostly. But what it was interesting is that for like they found that what is proposed that for regular cannabis users, right, that consume some like certain amount of like THC, actually it seems to modify the gut microbiome and those individuals seems to have a lower body weight. So they're actually not gaining weight despite having a higher caloric intake. So I think that's fascinating.
Hmm. Very interesting. Yeah.
So that's some things just to think about. We're still learning. And here I just see the reason I'm laughing is just about what I'm about to say, Arash. So is cannabis the only way to regulate that endocannabinoid system? So not really, right? So there are ways to really boost that system. So an anti-inflammatory way of eating, which we're just gonna touch on that a little bit, less exposure to toxins, have a stress and anxiety reduction, or practice stress and anxiety reduction techniques, like such as yoga, meditation, deep breathing, exercise, or basically anything that gives you joy, right? So if you just go out for a walk, or you're watching a comedy and that makes you laugh, you're activating that endocannabinoid system. Quality sleep and healthy relationships too, because sometimes just having just that toxicity, like those toxic relationships, you just can dish those. You don't need that. You don't need that stress. And also hugging, smiling, sex, and that's how I got my boy, right? By doing all those things. So it's
Is this a
really,
photo of you?
yes, my baby.
Oh, and you're a cute little baby. That's so adorable.
He was 2 weeks old at that
Wow.
time, and now
Amazing.
he's a toddler, 2 years old. So it is really amazing how all these things that I didn't know that they were interacting with a system that we actually have internally. Like that was amazing. So, like, talk about the anti-inflammatory way of eating, and I call it a way of eating because I don't want to call it a diet because a diet comes and goes. This is something that you would just want to be in a sustainable way. And basically, the principles of an anti-inflammatory way of eating, it comes from the Mediterranean diet. So this is when they're basically mostly like a plant-based. So we have a lot use of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, beans, soy products, nuts. Then we start adding up a little bit of fish, up to 2 times a week. Then we also have poultry, eggs, maybe 1 or 2 times a week. And monthly, red meats and sweets. They're not really that necessary. But if you consume it, it's okay. Just like a small amounts should be good. And some beverages. So we have water, red wine, cocoa, coffee, green, black tea. So this is almost like a modifications of the Mediterranean diet because the Mediterranean diet, they will drink red wine every day, right? So here it's really how you can adapt it to your individual needs. But this is just a really maybe nice overview of what it's involved in an anti-inflammatory diet. So what about if there's any endocannabinoid enhancing foods? And they are, because in order to synthesize those beautiful endocannabinoids that help us to regulate our mood and gut health and everything else in the body. So then we need to also provide the body with the substrate to synthesize those endocannabinoids. So it's very essential to have a good balance of essential fatty acids such as omega-6 and omega-3. And so if you want to get those omega-6s, you don't want to get them from corn oil, right? You don't want to get them from like the sunflower oil, that's just the regular vegetable oil. You want to get it like from other sources that actually helps to feed or to synthesize those endocannabinoids. So like hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, also the omega-3s like from sardines, salmon, anchovies. In eggs, if you can get free range chickens, that would be great. If not, at least make sure they're local. I know they can be expensive. But what I found fascinating about the hemp hearts particularly is that they also have a type of fatty acid that is key in synthesizing those endocannabinoids and also has their own content of omega-3. So it's pretty wholesome. It's a beautiful plant as a whole. I'm in love with it, Arash. I don't
It sounds like it, and your information is very passionate and true. You can tell.
know. So there you go. So here's then we have chocolate. Who doesn't love chocolate? Well, here's the thing. I didn't know that actually chocolate seems to contain some compounds that are structurally similar to anandamide and could bind to those receptors. Unfortunately, I don't think it can survive the whole journey through the digestive system, so it might not be as effective to as if you will to take those cannabinoids from the cannabis plant. However, there are still certain like fatty acids in chocolate that in flavonoids that they can enhance that effect. And they also, those fatty acids engage with the endocannabinoid system and might prevent the breakdown of anandamide. So it might help you keep those anandamide levels up, right? So then you're more calm and relaxed, or depending on what your body really needs. And so here is a really brief review, and I just love those mangoes. So I wanted to like the terpenes, and these are the most common because there are way more terpenes available in the cannabis plant. But what is really neat about this is not only found in the cannabis plant. So these terpenes are the aromatic compounds responsible for that smell, and they're also really the substrate for essential oils. So we have the pinene that have like certain like anti-inflammatory effects, and then we have they find it in pine trees, pine cones, basil, and sage. So it's kind of amazing because even my husband, when he goes and we vape outside across the pine trees, he says that the effects of that cannabis seems to be even better. Like he just feels so much relaxed when you do it. And I think it's just that effects and that synergy with all these other terpenes, even in our environment. So that we have other terpenes. Let me. Oh my goodness! Honestly, Raj, you can help me with those names.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah,
easy. Pyrophyllene, linalool, right? Myrcene. So they're difficult to say, but very advantageous for people.
they really are. And I think what is really amazing, like mangoes, for instance, so it's quite high in myrcene and it's like a sleep aid. And they also, like, they found that when you consume it, when after you're having like some consuming cannabis and you take some myrcene, it gives you like that couch effect, like a just more sedative. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're high, it's just like more relaxing. And so I think that's what I found really fascinating. And the caryophyllene is quite interesting because they're found in the black pepper. We use black pepper on everything, right? But we cook with black pepper, oregano, cinnamon, carrot, basil, cloves, lavender, and it seems that this is more like almost acting like a cannabinoid, not so much as a terpene. So it's just quite fascinating as we learn more about these different compounds in the cannabis plant. So other than just the regular tea plant, right? So it also contains so they also enhances supports the endocannabinoid system. Black pepper, as I said, it has a fatty acid that prevents the uptake of those endocannabinoids. So it could help with reducing inflammation and providing pain relief. So we have turmeric and black pepper. So we know they could promote reduce inflammation, but we have to make sure that there is that combination because at the end of the day, curcuma. Oh my goodness, whew, need a break. We need to understand it's like that it's not really that bioavailable, so the body doesn't really absorb a lot of these inflammatory components, and when you take it in large amounts it can actually cause some digestive issues. So these are the things that you really want to use to enhance that flavor, that terpene effect when you are preparing your meals. Then we have the prebiotics and probiotics. So just kind of very basic here. So our prebiotics are those foods for the probiotics, right? So in prebiotics, we cannot digest prebiotics, but probiotics can by promoting health benefits. So what they do with this prebiotics, as I mentioned early on, is that we have these millions of bacteria in our gut, and they're able to modulate that immune response. When we feed those bacteria, they're able to actually synthesize nutrients that otherwise cannot be really obtained by just consuming your regular meals. So these prebiotics are like undigested. The bacteria can digest it and produce, let's say, like short fatty acids that directly feeds the gut cells, and it helps repair the lining of the gut cells. So that's why a diet that is high in fiber, it's just not the hype that is a high fiber. It's because it's feeding that microbiome, the microbiota, and to help to modulate even more that inflammation response. And when you are going to groceries, right? Because sometimes, and you're looking at certain ingredients, pay attention to these ingredients. I'm not really gonna say them, but like if you see inulin, like fructose oligosaccharides, those types of fibers, they're prebiotics. And so here are a few examples of them. So we have like from vegetables, legumes, fruits, grains, and nuts. So usually whole grains. And here's an example of how you can actually include that in food. So this is a toast with like avocado toast, which everybody's so crazy about here in North America. And I grew up eating avocados, like. But we had avocado toast, which is amazing, and you get those healthy fatty acids, and you add like a soybeans or edamame pesto to it. Then we also have here some an oatmeal mixed with quinoa, cashews, and all the other goodies, right? And hemp hearts. So it's not really that complicated to get those things through your meals. Then another thing is resistant starches are also a part, they're being studied as these starches really resist digestion in the small intestine, and it almost acts as a prebiotics. It's also feeding those bacteria. And again, many of the foods that we grew up in, like maybe our developing countries, are so beneficial. So like lentils, green plantains, green bananas, they're actually resistant starches that can feed our microbiome. Isn't that fascinating, Arash?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, and very true. I like it.
So here, when we talk about probiotics, I just want to make to differentiate, because sometimes people tend to think that we're taking, oh, I'm eating probiotic foods. So, and they refer to all the fermented foods that you see there. So they're not really necessarily called probiotics. Probiotics are really the bacteria that, when consumed in the proper amount, can provide health benefits. So, one product, for instance, that has shown benefits to antibiotic induced diarrhea is BioK, right? Because it has a specific strain that it helps really with that particular condition. However, fermented foods that have live active cultures, it can also help to really feed that bacteria in our gut. So that makes sure that it's not the pickles that we get from the regular shelf, are all the fermented foods that are kept in the fridge when you go to the grocery store, right? So we got the yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut kind of thing. And here's a really like a summary of how important gut health is. It's to like the importance of gut modulating gut health to reduce inflammation. And so, as we can see, if we have a really healthy or promote a healthy gut, we can also help to really enhance the activations of those cannabinoid receptors at the gastrointestinal system level. So I think there's a really good balance, and there's a lot of potential here. And I'm just kind of looking forward to see even more research on this. So just keep in mind that whatever you eat can impact your gut microbiota within 24 hours. So that's why it's sometimes it's certain foods that you're actually starting to add in probiotic foods. it just starts modifying your gut microbiota in a positive way. So making small changes, one thing at a time, is really gonna pay off. So I think, summary, my goodness, oh, I didn't rush there.
Great job.
So to me, beyond the cannabis plant, and why I say beyond the cannabis plant, because it's just way more to it. Cannabis is a tool, right? And we can begin to restore our endocannabinoid system with natural options such as the anti-inflammatory way of eating, reducing environmental toxins, and really enjoying life to the fullest. But if you will need to supplement those cannabinoids, we have the beautiful cannabis plant, right, Arash?
That's correct. That's correct. It should be a tool in everyone's belt.
Exactly. So now, so soon I will be, because I'm so tired of living with chronic pain and fatigue for so many years, and I think there's no cure, right? It's a holistic approach to care. So soon I'll be launching a free Facebook group called Breaking the Pain and Fatigue Cycle Club. That sounds like
Amazing.
I'm gonna have a party there.
Amazing. Amazing.
So what I will be promoting is recognizing inflammatory triggers, how to adopt an anti-inflammatory way of eating, stop food guilt, and then autoimmune dieting. Hopefully achieve sustainable weight loss and thrive despite your food sensitivities, and a little bit of talk of cannabis as I'm allowed. And so now I will stop my presentation and give it up to Arash.
Sure. That was very, very good, Christine. I mean, it was very extensive, and you can tell that there's a lot of passion behind what you were saying. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm just looking forward to see what you have for us here today.
For sure. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. And let me know if you can see the presentation. Can you see it?
I can see it. Now I'm going to add it to your stream. So that's good. So I can see you, but you probably cannot see yourself, right?
No, I cannot see myself and I cannot see anybody. So if there are questions or anything that you would like to jump in on, Cristina, please just do so. I'm not easily interrupted, so it's okay.
It's okay. Thank you.
So no problem. So I'll get started. So as mentioned, my name is Arash. I'm one of the medical graduates that works at Apollo. Apollo is a very, very interesting kind of congregation of medical professionals and research facility as well. So initially, Apollo started purely as a research facility. There was a group of physicians that wanted to prescribe medical cannabis for their patients as an additional treatment option, but they were kind of unsure of how to do it. They didn't receive schooling with medical cannabis. They were told that cannabis was a substance that was not to be looked at lightly. It was a controlled banned substance, and they had to stay away from it. But they started hearing from their patients how beneficial it was for them. And again, they wanted to learn more about it. So that's how Apollo initially started. Since then, it has graduated into a very, very large medical cannabis clinic that also has a lot of fundamental focus on the research behind all of the medical cannabis that we are prescribing to patients who are requiring it for their day-to-day needs. So we have been an industry leader in the world of research. Our patient database is roughly around 50,000 now. We are a team of physiatrists, anesthesiologists, we have psychiatrists, we have family doctors, and of course, all of the patients are very closely monitored and followed by the researchers and the academics and the statisticians. So it's an interesting setup that we have now, and we're very proud of some of the stuff that we've accomplished since we've gotten started. We've recently been published for the use of medical cannabis in chronic pain. It was a 12-month study that we conducted. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but we had a 95% reduction in opioid use and a very large, respectable percentages when it came to reduction of pain severity and pain incidence. So again, it was a very, very positive study. We've conducted research in PTSD with the use of medical cannabis. We've also worked closely with a few much larger organizations and studying how cannabis can affect people who drive. Also, we've conducted a sleep study. So we are very, very proud of what we've accomplished thus far, but we know we are just scratching the surface. So we have much to learn and much to prove for some of the patients that are telling us already, look, this works for me and this is helping, but I want more information as well. So again, we're trying our best. Christina, you had mentioned that a lot of the studies that exist now are animal-based studies. So we're trying to turn that dial of human understanding so we can understand more about how cannabis affects the human body. And thus far, it's been very similar to a lot of the animal models that have been conducted. So who are our patients? I added this slide in just because, there's always this stigma or this thought that a cannabis clinic is going to be a place that you go into and there's going to be a whole bunch of people, using cannabis around the place, and there's going to be a puff of smoke and some, nice slow music and snacks in the background. Guys, that's not at all how it is. We are a doctor's office. Initially, when patients arrive, they will check in. They will be going through a vigorous process that we've perfected through the years to ensure that the physician has as much information about the patient's background, past medical history, current use of medical cannabis, current use for any kind of history or problems that we would want to, find out before a prescription is given, just like any other medication. So our patients go through this process. Step one, when you arrive, you will be going through a triage. Now, this is where we will understand what you're looking to use cannabis for, any past medications, any current medications, any past medical history we need to know about. After all that information is collected, you will have a consultation with one of our healthcare professionals. A lot of our doctors have a fair amount of experience when it comes to prescribing medical cannabis now, and they will discuss what a patient can expect, the timelines in which they can expect it. So many patients say, well, I just want to take a medication and everything is better. I want the single cure. And we have to, taper their expectation. And like Cristina explained, this is going to be a very, very important part of your process. Nonetheless, it is involved in an entire lifestyle modification when we want to talk about a better result with any medication. After a consultation is had with one of our healthcare professionals, a medical document will be generated. This medical document is sent to a pharmacy, or in our case, called a licensed producer. I'm going to expand a little bit on licensed producers in the next few slides, but this is where all medical prescriptions will go. After the registration of the prescription has been completed, you will go through a full education. Now, this is kind of our bread and butter, right, Cristina? This is where I think you help a lot of individuals out as well. Learning about this medication is just as important as accessing it and having a a controlled source from a licensed producer. So you can have the product and you can have the medication, but if you don't know how to use it, then chances are patients will not be successful. So an education is very important with this medication. After the education, the medication is always shipped directly to the patient's home or registered address. So attaining your prescription is sent to you in the mail. There is no physical location that you can enter for the prescription to be filled. Okay, that's very, very important for patients to understand. Yes, there are recreational sources of cannabis, but when it comes to medical cannabis, we want it to be more controlled, more regulated, and more understood, which is why we have to have a connection to the licensed producers. Now, licensed producers, kind of a nickname for a company that grows and produces cannabis under the supervision of Health Canada. That's very important to remember, because although many people can harvest this plant and they have pure intentions and want to help people out and are giving out oils and dry bud and other soaps and products that they've created, the problem is those products are not controlled, they are not monitored. We do not understand to the full extent what the dose of that product is. So we will at times have patients come to us and say, so-and-so down the street gave me an oil that they made at home and it let me sleep all week. It was fantastic. Can you guys give me that oil? Well, what was the dose? How many milligrams of CBD? How many milligrams of THC? It needs to be more regimented and structured so we can understand it, and then we can replicate those positive results. And patients are often surprised when they come in and they thought, well, I was using very high THC to sleep. And then when we get it from a licensed producer, well, they only needed 5 milligrams. Right? They're far from the high dose that they thought they were at. So again, it's very important. There are now over 500 authorized licensed producers in Canada. Cannabis is becoming, well, not becoming, is very popular in terms of additional treatment options for people. And there are many companies out there trying to, fill that need, fill that niche. So we use any licensed producer that we want at Apollo. And again, it is to the discretion of the patient. If patients do not have an understanding of licensed producers, we will have recommended list. But again, these are people that we have worked with long and hard and are very reputable and an excellent source for medical cannabis.
Arash, but I do have a question.
Sure.
But so I know like we need to have like we would prefer like to have that kind of controlled environment. But what if a patient really wants to grow their own? What will Apollo help them to kind of navigate that system so they can get that kind of license so they can grow their own?
That's an excellent question. We would prescribe a different type of prescription that allows patients to grow their own medication. So again, it is still more regulated and more controlled than finding seeds or harnessing the plant from anywhere. If you attain the seeds from a licensed producer, you are aware of the exact genetics and they can grow it that way as well. Now, when it comes to that, I always tell people, you have to have some experience there. If you think this plant attracts people, you should see what it does to bugs. But nonetheless, some people are very talented when it comes to that, and they have an experience with growing cannabis, and we're happy to support. Those people can attain a prescription to allow them to do that as well. Good
Okay.
question, Cristina.
Thanks.
So I will briefly cover CBD and THC. Cristina, you covered it very well in your presentation. These chemical compounds, CBD and THC, come off of the cannabis plant. The plant is very complex. It connects to what is called the endocannabinoid system. The two molecules that we are allowed to use are CBD and THC. Now, there are other variants of these molecules. There's CBG, there's CBN. At the end of the day, it all has to do with affinity. Okay, so CBD has a certain attraction to the endocannabinoid system, and THC has a higher attraction to the endocannabinoid system. Like Cristina mentioned, the receptors are all over the body, but I'll get to that shortly. As we know, CBD has anti-inflammatory properties. This is probably the most important reason anybody uses CBD. Second to that is analgesic effects. Okay, a fancy way of saying painkiller. Okay, you can also have an anti-epileptiform. Right, we're starting to see more and more patients come to us that have not found the level of success they wished for with the use of traditional anti-epileptic medications and are now trying to attain more help, more benefit. So again, very interesting. Also, antipsychotic. Okay, mental health is a very, very important topic now, right? It always has been, but now it's at the forefront of health. And we know that there are many conditions that suffer brief psychotic episodes, and our psychiatrist is happy to trial CBD with these patients in adjuvant alongside other medications to see if there's more benefit they can attain. So again, very important stuff that we're hopefully going to be publishing and researching in the near future. THC is the other chemical compound that comes from the very, very complex cannabis plant. Again, I put here, powerful anti-inflammatory. Okay, THC has a bit of an infamous background. People think, well, if I'm using THC, I'm now going into the world of recreation. Guys, that is not true. Okay, this is a dose-dependent psychoactive component. A dose-dependent psychoactive component. So if a patient takes too much and they feel some of the ill effects of THC, well, we now know what we don't want to feel, and we stay beneath that dose. And a lot of patients have a tremendous result with microdosing or small amounts of THC. Also, as you mentioned in your presentation, Cristina, the importance of sleep should never be understated. Okay, insomnia is very, very easily dealt with when it comes to THC. And so many of our patients say, you know what, it's helping with my pain and it's helping with my appetite and it's doing this, that, and the other, but I've never slept better. Do you mind if I continue? Do you mind if I use this more? And we say, yes, within reason, within understanding of what to expect, we would be happy to support that patient. This is a brief breakdown of the endocannabinoid system. As Cristina mentioned, these receptors are found everywhere. We call them ubiquitous when they're everywhere. There are synthetic versions of these compounds. There's nabilone, right? And I think the other one is called Sativex, not to be confused with sativa plants. Sativex is another, it's supposed to be a water-soluble version that is a spray under the tongue. Again, for any given reason, the laboratory synthetic versions of these chemical compounds have not been met with the same success as the organic compounds. Patients have reported to us that they will use the synthetic compounds for a week or two before they are fully not attaining results. I don't want to say that they are becoming tolerant, but that's what they are reporting to us. They're saying that it used to be 10 milligrams could put me to sleep. I now need 30 and I'm barely feeling anything. So again, a quick tolerance is found with the synthetic versions. We have the endocannabinoids, which are the ones that are endogenous, as Cristina mentioned, and the ones that come from plants, again, are phytocannabinoids. So we're using this plant compound to substitute into an endocannabinoid system, which means we are not bringing anything new to the table. It's a very interesting thought. People think that we're introducing this foreign body into our body. Guys, this is a compound that your body knows way better than we do. So it's well accepted. This is a further breakdown of where these receptors are found in the human body, and this is the reason, this slide alone is the reason why cannabis can help so many different illnesses. Cristina, I love the slide that you mentioned, all of the autoimmune conditions. There's psoriatic arthritis, there's rheumatoid arthritis, you had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? There was, I believe, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, you even had ankylosing spondylitis. These are all conditions that have fancy Latin names, but at the end of the day, are your immune system, which is the army you were referring to, attacking a specific layer of protein in your body. Now, if we look on this slide at the very bottom here, I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me move. Can you guys see that at the bottom? There's an immune system with the CB1 receptor, or CB2 receptor, I apologize.
I think so, yeah.
Almost outside of the silhouette. Right in between the male and female reproductive system, there's the kidneys, and below that, there's the immune system. So again, without a doubt, the endocannabinoid system plays a firm role with most autoimmune conditions. Cristina, you mentioned yourself, you have been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. We find that a lot of the rheumatoid patients tell us in the morning when they wake up is when they have the most pain. Their fingers are the most stiff in the morning. And that's because the immune system is awake all night, trying to repair the body, and that army, while repairing things that are going on, will also attack some of those synovial joints.
Yes.
So we started to introduce high levels of CBD for those patients in the evening. And again, we've found success with these people. Now, we cannot say, because we do not have the research, that we are disease-modifying therapy, but a lot of patients will use CBD in congruence with the rheumatologist-suggested medications and find that they need less of those medications. We consider that a huge success.
I think personally, and I'm not just saying for everyone to try, but my biggest really success with using the cannabis is the restorative sleep, because with us, we're constantly fatigued, and even we can sleep for 48 hours and we're still tired. But then I find that since I use that, like my kind of my sweet spot, or I hit my sweet spot between like CBD and THC, I find that I can find really good restorative sleep until my toddler wakes up, right? But so that's
Makes sense. Makes sense.
But I think once you hit that, right, like it really can help you to fight that fatigue and that chronic pain.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? The physical wakings of your sleep cycle we can't help with, but with what's going on in your body, you know, we understand that the immune system is for lack of a better term, a very expensive area of the body. An immune cell costs a lot of energy. And if your immune system is constantly active, well, then your body's in overdrive trying to produce those cells and trying to keep them up to count. And then the patient is just fatigued to an extent in which they have trouble getting through a day without a nap. So you're right. Sleep assistance is probably one of the most popular reasons people come to us, and then they find benefit elsewhere, again, based on all the receptors that are available in the system. Quickly, you mentioned Hashimoto's. That is an autoimmune attack of the thyroid. The thyroid is taught to any medical professional as the #1 organ in the body for permission. It is a permissible organ. If the thyroid is not functioning properly, everybody slows down. So again, when we talk about autoimmune thyroiditis, it's a very, very acute and important condition that we can potentially help those patients with as well. The gut is on here. If I had my choice with this slide, I would have the large intestine take up the entire slide, because again, that is where you had mentioned as well, our gut health being so important. You call the intestine or the digestive system the second brain. I absolutely love that. There's an enteric neurological system in the gut, and we now know there are more serotonin receptors in the gut than there are in the brain. So it sounds funny to explain this to patients from time to time. Although you have eyes, the brain is blind. It fully accepts all of its messages from the body through these hormones and through these receptors. And if the gut is not happy, then the brain is not happy. And the neurotransmitter that connects us all is serotonin that way. So it's interesting that you mentioned that in your presentation. I really appreciate you mentioning that, because I always sound like, you know, just saying it off the whim, but in actuality, there's a lot of proof behind it. So thank you.
Yeah.
These are some of the things that we've already covered, but just to mention again, the endocannabinoid system can help with inflammation, pain, digestion, sleep, mood. Bone density is another one that we also have heard about, right? And reproduction. Now, if I go back one slide quickly, both the male and female reproductive system have a CB1 receptor. Very important social medicine. Okay, a lot of people are shy to talk to healthcare professionals or shy to have this conversation in public, but we hear about it all the time. You know, this is helping my relationship. It's important. We have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the conditions that we have documented in clinic to find a lot of resolve with. Obviously, top of the list, chronic pain. That's an umbrella term for many conditions, right? Osteoarthritis, number one. You had mentioned in your slides, Cristina, our osteoarthritis is 1 in 10 adults.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we all lose the battle with gravity and we get some sore joints and make some pains. So that is where osteoarthritis comes in. Rheumatoid arthritis, I think you mentioned 1 in 1,000, so much more rare, a rheumatological condition.
I think
Neuropathic
1
pain,
in
second on the
100.
list.
1 in 100.
1 in
Like
100.
1%. Yeah.
So osteoarthritis is 10 times more likely.
Mm-hmm.
Neuropathic pain is second on our list here. Yeah, it's funny to say neuropathic pain is so high on the list, but understanding that neuropathic pain is the long-term sequelae, long-term symptom of untreated diabetes. Right? They get neuropathic pain in the nerves that are the furthest away, their fingertips, their feet, their legs. So that's something that we address in clinic often. Fibromyalgia, I won't say it again, sleep cycle. MS, another autoimmune condition that we see as well. I'm going to leave this slide, but understand that if you guys have any questions about these conditions, we can cover them in the Q&A.
Yeah, so I haven't
I
seen any
quickly wanted to
questions.
go.
Sorry.
Sure, go ahead. No,
I
so
haven't
go
seen
ahead. I can't speak to go.
haven't seen some questions so far, but I just kind of understanding that this system is a little strange. But if I see any questions that can come after the presentation, we'll be happy to address them.
Sure. I wanted to quickly cover over methods of consumption as well. The main form of prescribed medical cannabis is edible. Okay, it may come in an oil, it may come in a capsule. Some of these licensed producers are now producing chocolates and other edibles. At the end of the day, they all go through your stomach and they go through what's called first pass metabolism. Your liver is the organ that is in charge of grabbing any fat soluble compound and redistributing in the body. That first pass metabolism takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to kick in, and it should last anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, again, depending on some of those enzymes that Cristina mentioned in her presentation. Some people have more readily available enzymes and they metabolize quicker. Some people don't, and they metabolize slower. Again, based on the patient's metabolism, this medication may last between 4 to 8 hours. The other form is the inhaled form. Again, no patient is talked about, or no patient is driven towards a vaporizer unless it's going to benefit them. Okay, there are certain conditions that require rapid and immediate relief. Okay, one of the ones that comes to mind is PTSD. Okay, you have a person who is mentally going through a war zone and has all these physical symptoms, and they need it to stop now. We can't, in our right mind, tell them, well, take this capsule or take this oil and wait 2 hours. That's just too difficult for them. So again, inhaling cannabis has its place. There are licensed producers that create Health Canada approved vaporizers. We've added a few photos of them here. And there are medical devices in which a person can use dry formed cannabis and put that into one of these vaporizers. Nothing is being burned, nothing is being combusted. The vaporizer will push the cannabis plant to a place in which it is letting off a steam or a mist, kind of like baking it, and then they can inhale that and attain benefits almost instantly. We say within 5 minutes, but patients report to us, a minute or two into it, they feel better. Now, there's a misconception. People think that if you smoke cannabis, it's more beneficial. And guys, that's not at all true. I would love to take the time to explain that further, but just letting you know that Health Canada has approved a certain number of devices and forms of vaporization to attain this medication as well. And also, one more statement quickly I will mention, not everybody who is inhaling cannabis is using THC. Okay, so I paused for dramatic effect. There are CBD-based strains and CBD-based vaporizers. So you could have a chronic pain patient using CBD to attain immediate relief as well. I've added this slide to discuss, again, briefly some of the side effects. I think, Cristina, you and I were talking before this presentation started, some of the possible side effects that we see with the use of THC, again, none of these are CBD, these are THC, are commonly found on a lot of over-the-counter medications, right? You have to be careful with Tylenol, so it does cause drowsiness. Right? There's dry mouth that can occur from many medications, and if you use too much, obviously, dizziness, red eyes, drowsiness, all these things can occur. It's interesting to me when we discuss this because when we use a medication for sleep assistance, is drowsiness a side effect? Or is that a desired effect? Again, I leave the discussion to people that want to discuss it, but these are the things that we have seen if a patient uses too high a level of THC. Some of the very uncommon side effects, but are more commonly spoken about, are panic attacks, paranoia, and psychosis. Now, guys, there is no such thing as a patient who uses THC who has no history of medical or psychiatric illness and has massive eruptions of these side effects. It's almost unheard of. If a patient has a history of panic attacks, suffers from any kind of psychosis, well, then it's quite easy for the physician to say, this medication may exacerbate some of your symptoms, so I'm going to simply give you CBD alone. That is a doctor's consultation decision. That's very easily protected against. No one should be afraid of these side effects when going towards a medical cannabis prescription, because again, we would monitor that, we would educate the patient towards it. I've also added in a very sneaky way here opioid overdose, just to briefly touch on it. The opioid crisis is no secret, right? We lose hundreds of Canadians a year to opioid overdose. The reason why cannabis is so safe is that cannabis does not have any receptors in the breathing centers of our brain. Opioids do. So if a patient is to use a high level of opioids or use an opioid and mix other neurological suppressants such as alcohol, there's an increased risk that they will suffer from the respiratory depression and they'll simply stop breathing in their sleep. It's a very unfortunate and a very sad outcome to a patient who was just looking to use a medication to deal with pain and sleep.
Arash, I have one question. Originally, when I started using CBD oil, surprisingly, I felt a little fatigued. So it took like a little bit of like a trial error to find kind of the right type of oil or cultivar that will really help me, because I think that could be also a side effect. We don't want that side effect, but it could happen, or at least while you're still adjusting. So that's something that people may maybe experience, and it's no reason to give up on it. It's just a way that we might maybe try or give it a little bit more time.
Very good point, Cristina. Sometimes people will say, when I took CBD, it created, a bit of a relaxed feeling or a drowsy feeling for me as well. Well, then we need to find out what the dose was, right? We can reduce it a little bit. And if we're reducing it a lot, well, then we can add another dose 4 to 6 hours later. And then patients will come back and say, when I use a small dose 3 times a day, it addresses my pain and I feel great. If I take one big dose, then I feel a little bit drowsy. So again, it's all about the person's reaction, and it's very individualized. And these are the exact things that a consultation with one of our physicians will cover, right? They'll warn patients about all this. So great point. Don't give up on a medication just because you've had one experience that you didn't fully enjoy. So it's a good point.
So we do have a question. We do have a question here, Raj, and I think it's quite cool. So can you see that one?
I can't, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. So it says, do we have, so that's okay. You keep your presentation. So the question is, do we have cannabinoid receptors in our mouth? And if so, would it make more sense to take oil, edibles over capsules?
Good question. I cannot say we don't have endocannabinoid receptors in our mouth because the digestive system includes the mouth all the way down. So that is kind of something that I'm not aware of. But if you are taking an oil, remember, it's a misconception. People think that the digestion of the oil begins in the mouth. The only thing that we break down in our mouths are carbohydrates. Right? So our saliva breaks down carbohydrates, and that's where the digestion starts. But with oils and fats in general, it requires the liver. So first pass metabolism, as we discussed. We had a lot of patients tell us, well, I put the oil under my tongue, and then I wait a few minutes, and then I swallow, and then I attain the effects. Well, that's very nice of you to do, but it requires your liver. So it doesn't matter if you put it under your tongue or not. That's kind of something that we've heard a lot about in clinic. There is no fat metabolism in the mouth. So good question. I think you're asking if it breaks down the oil.
That's a good question because a lot of times we hear that and it's like, oh, you put it in your mouth, like especially the oils, and then you. So I would really like to know, like, what's the difference? Like when you have this spray, does it absorb like right away when you put it under the tongue,
No, it
or
doesn't.
is it, or the oil? Like like I always gotta be
Yeah.
curious about that.
It's a great question, right? Remember this. We used to have, a couple of years ago, you could only attain an oil and it only came in a syringe, like an oral
Mhm.
syringe. So a lot of patients were trying to, take this dose, and then they would call us and say, "Well, I missed, and I got some on my eye, and I got some in my cheeks, and what do I do now? And do I have to, go to the emergency?" We would say, "No, wipe your face, and you can retake your oil. But if you put it under your tongue, you won't miss." And for any given reason, that's kind of transpired into, well, I put it under my tongue, or I could spray under my tongue, and it's faster and it's absorbing. In reality, guys, it's all going back to first pass metabolism. The liver must be involved for the metabolism of fats. So good question. The only other way we can change the method of consumption where this medication goes into our system is through inhalation. And your lungs can absorb that fat and transfer it into the body a lot faster. Those are the only two organs that can help us. Very good
Interesting.
question, though.
Thanks.
No problem. I added this slide just so we can understand some of the advantages of having a prescription. Again, a lot of this stuff is um, things that our patients understand on a daily basis, but maybe not well understood amongst others. So I wanted to put here, cannabis is tax deductible. It'll be much lower priced when you purchase from a licensed producer, because those licensed producers are creating medication. They're not selling it recreationally, or they're not having someone else purchase it and then sell it as a third party. So again, very important. There's compassionate pricing as well for people who would qualify. And it's overall less expensive that way. Apollo also offers, a physician-guided care, and we are open 7 days a week for all education-related questions. That brings me to the end.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow, we made it. 1
We
hour.
made it.
Good timing. So no, this is great. Thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to kind of have a little chat here. So what I don't see like other questions, but I will have this presentation posted on my Facebook page for 48 hours. Then I will save the recording. And for those who registered, I will send a link to the recording as well as some handouts that we prepared for you. So we actually prepared a grocery list for a happy tummy with anti-inflammatory and endocannabinoid-rich foods. I think that's maybe a new language we're going to start here. And also prepare like a summary page, a fact sheet with the information that we shared today from Apollo Clinics and from my presentation, as well as a 3-day meal plan, just to kind of give you an idea of how you can utilize those endocannabinoid-rich foods. So again, I think I feel so much better, Arash. So one thing something is missing in your clinic. You
What's
know what
that?
it is?
A dietitian?
Yeah. No, me. You're
Oh,
missing me.
not just any, of course.
Just
Yes. Yeah,
me.
Cristina. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I think I really wanted to showcase that it takes really that holistic approach, right? The cannabis is that, like you said, it's a tool in your toolkit belt.
Mhm.
But it just goes beyond that. Like you need to support that endocannabinoid system in order for those phytocannabinoids to work, right? If your
Correct.
body's not prepared, so how are you really going to take that? It's really, and that's probably why people really don't feel the positive effects, because perhaps the lifestyle choices are maybe not leading to take a good uptake of those cannabinoids.
I agree. It needs to be teamwork. Okay, it needs to be
Mm-hmm.
multifactorial. There needs to be many assets of, many aspects involved in someone's care. And you touched on so many great points, Cristina. It's important for people to understand that moving forward, we're so used to take this pill and everything will be better.
Mm-hmm.
Health is shifting. People are understanding more. People are knowing that not everyone is the same, and we are all individualized, and our bodies all require different things. So it's a very interesting and happy thought. I'm so happy to hear patients that know about this stuff moving forward. So
I honestly want to feel that as a dietitian also, if I'm talking to like my kind of my clients or the people that I talk to is mostly people with chronic pain, with autoimmune conditions. I don't want them to feel ashamed of talking about cannabis. It's
Mhm.
like if they tell me they're taking, I know I'm not comparing, but it's like they're taking vitamin D, but I want to be aware that that's also part of their wellness toolkit, that they don't feel ashamed, that we're not shaming them because they're using cannabis. And so
Absolutely.
and that was the reason why I decided to do this free webinar to say I want to change that cannabis stigma.
Mhm.
And believe me, like I'm from Colombia, it took me a long time to really realize the potential benefits of cannabis.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I always like to mention to people when I first started at Apollo, I was like, I don't know anything. I went back to my medical books and I read, and there's very little in the notes, right? We had to learn quickly what the endocannabinoid system was capable of. And
Hmm.
now that, once I've learned about it, I had a lot of stigma myself. And it just went straight out the window because I thought, how could I judge this, plant that is helping so many people, but being abused by certain people? A small percentage of people will abuse anything, and it has
Hmm.
nothing to do with the plant. So again, you're right. The stigmas and some of those thought processes that are in place, we need to help break those down.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think today we're maybe taking that step. And thank you so much, Melissa and Stacy, for being here and supporting me, Shauna's. I love them. They're my friends from education. So I really love the support. And this is really why we believe that providing that like a high standard of education, and it's not just the filling the box, but we need to provide evidence base. And I'm so glad to hear that Apollo Cannabis Clinic. And that's why the reason why I joined Apollo Cannabis Clinic as a medical patient, because of the research background that they're trying and getting that data, because we need the data to really show it.
Yes. If it was up to us, we'd have all of the research running at the same time, but we have to have a very regimented structure. So, you know, patients come to us all the time for that reason, and we're so happy to take them on, and we're so happy to help where we can. Hopefully, in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll be, right at the top with all of the papers that we need.
That would be amazing. So Raj, thank you so much. So I'm going to end the broadcast. Oh, you stay with me for a little bit. But I'm gonna end the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, the live recording will be on my Facebook page for 48 hours, and then I will just send the link to the recording for those the registrants who were not able to attend. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everybody.
Ken. Welcome. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. I'm just gonna end here.